To work with mold method, you'll have to bring in an object that can be any shape and size. It can be made of any material. You'll probably just have to cover it with paper towel in order to prepare the mold for the clay. If you don't cover it in paper towel, then the clay will stick. So now that I've prepared my object for the mold, I'm going to go ahead and get my slab. For mold method, you do want your slab to be a little bit thinner than what we had for hard slab, because we're going to need this slab to be very flexible. It needs to go around this mold. So the thinner it is, the more flexible it will be. But then you have to find that perfect balance. You don't also want it to be too thin, because then it will crack and split. So remember to compress both sides as soon as you start seeing those little cracks. Still a little thick, so I'm going to throw my slab a bit more. Remember, if you don't like throwing a slab, you can use your rolling pin. Compressing is not just for looks, but it makes the clay stronger. Okay, so I have my slab. I'm going to go ahead and just cut off a little bit of a straight edge down there. And I'm going to lay my mold onto my clay slab. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and bring one side up and tap it down. Okay, I already have a lot of excess down here, so I'm going to cut that off. Okay, and then I'll just finish rolling it until it just barely overlaps. You know, you don't want a lot of overlap. When you're layering two pieces of clay on top of each other, you're basically trapping air. So we definitely try not to do that. There's my overlap, and that's a bit much. So I'm going to cut some more off. Okay, cut off the excess. Okay, and because it's wet clay, I can just smear it in. Remember, wet clay to wet clay, you can just smear it together. When it's leather hard or leather hard is involved, you have to score. Okay, this tapers. So I'm going to go ahead, before I smear that edge in, I'm going to go ahead and press it to the mold so that it takes that shape. It's got a nice tapered neck there. And when I did that, I got a lot of excess. So I'm going to cut that off before I start to smear that in. And remember, in wet clay stage, you have to let it be ugly. This is the ugly stage. Even if I try smoothing it out, look at that. It makes muddy marks. So don't, okay? All I'm just doing right now is making sure it's on the mold. So I paddle it a little bit. All the perfections will come later. All right. So it's pretty good on my mold. Now what I have to do is cover it with plastic very lightly and let this get to leather hard. The trick though is not letting it get too dry, because what happens is when this dries, it shrinks, okay? If you let it keep shrinking, shrinking, shrinking without taking it off the mold, then eventually it's just gonna crack off the mold because it's shrinking and your mold is in the way. And so it just, crumbles and cracks. You have to catch it before that time. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this in plastic, and we'll come back once it's leather hard and I'll show you the next step. All right, time to finish up that mold method. We're gonna take off the bag and check on the stage of the clay. And it definitely feels leather hard enough so that when I remove it off of the mold, it's gonna be able to hold its shape and let me work with it without, you know, collapsing or crumbling. So before I show you how to take it off the mold, since it is on the mold and has some support right now, I am going to go ahead and use my rubber rib and just clean it up a little bit, because again, it's got that support under there, so I can apply a good amount of pressure and do some of that cleanup. Again, when I'm smoothing it, you know, it really isn't just for looks. It just strengthens that clay so much, and you will learn in here that that's important, you know, for your projects to last. You need to be able to know how to make that clay strong. A lot of times we feel if we at least get it to the cart, then you're home free. And that's actually incorrect. You're home free after the bisque fire. So we need the clay to be strong enough to survive that first firing, not just walking it over to the cart and letting it sit on the cart. All right, so that's pretty smooth, pretty compressed. So getting things off the mold is going to be different for whatever piece you choose. If you have something that has some sort of curvature to it, then what we 95% of the time need to do is cut it off the mold, okay? There will be times when you have something that, you know, maybe you're just molding a straight part, and then a lot of times you could just pull it off the mold, but don't force it. Okay, if I can't just easily push my mold out, then we just don't even try. We're gonna go ahead and cut it off. So to do that, you wanna use our sharpest tool, which is our carving tool. And from top to bottom, I'm going to make an entire cut. And I'm gonna press hard because I need it to go all the way through. And I know that it's hard to do after you spend all that time getting it on the mold, but I tell you, don't worry. It all goes back together nice and easy. Okay. So you can see by making the cut, I'm able to kind of open it up. Now, if one cut allows you to open it up enough and pull the mold out, then do it. But I'm going to show you what happens if this isn't enough. If I still can't get my mold out, okay, you're going to go to the exact other side and the same as before, slice it all the way down. And so yes, what I'm doing here is basically creating two pieces that are going to get joined together. Okay. So I'm slowly prying it off, okay? Gotta be gentle. So there's one side. Gently. Pry it off the other side. So there's my two halves. And now I'm going to just score them together because we're entering leather hard. Really good score marks. For the sake of the video, I'm going pretty quickly, but you will take time to make sure that you're not skimping out, you're doing this part good. Okay, you're going to take fingertip of water, drip it. Okay, maybe on the other side, fingertip of water, drip it, and then bring the two parts together. Check both sides, because you may have one side perfect and the other side's all messed up. Okay. When you've got them aligned, then you can start smearing it in. So, lots of tools to help. You could use this part of a carving tool. You could use a wooden modeling tool. You could use your finger. Those are your choices. Just remember, counter pressure is very important. So I'm using my left hand to kind of squeeze the clay and provide counter pressure. Since I'm pushing here, I'm squeezing so that it doesn't collapse on me. Other side, counter pressure. Now, I promise you, just making it look like it's smooth together right now does not mean that it is forever. So I know it's going to be tricky, but you have to get the interior as well. Otherwise, these little cracks, even though they look so perfectly disappeared, clay has memory. Ceramic artists talk about it all the time. Clay has memory. Things that you thought you kind of smoothed out of existence like to come back and haunt you. And again, it may not haunt you when it's on the cart, on the to be fired cart. It may haunt you when I'm unloading the bisque cart. All of a sudden, this little crack that you thought was old news comes back, okay? So that's why we have tools like wooden modeling tools to get into hard to reach places, okay, where your finger cannot. All right, so for the sake of the video, we're just gonna pretend that I've got this seam on the inside smoothed out all the way down, okay? Now, if at any point you are feeling like that seam is weak and just maybe has some gaps, then by all means, add a support coil. You can add a support coil whenever needed. You don't have to wait, just for a certain method like hard slab. You can use it whenever you are joining two pieces of clay together. If that seam calls for a support coil, then put one there. Okay? So if I feel this seam needs it, I'm gonna go ahead and score a little bit. I'm gonna lay that support coil on there. Okay, and then I'm gonna counter pressure with my left hand, but I'm going to paddle it. Because again, that's like pushing it into the gaps and into the seam. Paddle it in there, and then you can start to smooth it in. With your hand, with the rib, whatever tool works for you. But you gotta try all the tools. You never know which one's gonna be your favorite until you try them all. Okay. So again, notice no bottom. You save that for the leather hard stage. I've got myself a slab here, so I can cut out my bottom. Okay, again, leather hard. So look at that. See that little crack? It's coming back to haunt me. Don't lie. This is wet clay, so I don't need to score it. Go ahead and put fingertip of water in there. Put that bottom on. And then paddling it is going to give you the best connection. And then again, you make artistic decisions. Do you like the raw edge? Do you want to smoothen the edge? Those again will be your decisions. Just make sure you're making those decisions. Okay, don't just forget and then say that, oh, you meant to leave it like that, but really, you know, we can tell that it looks unrefined and unplanned and actually, you know, detracts from your piece. Everything should be an artistic decision. Okay, now remember, we're trying to make things that are 5 to 6 inches. With mold method, you don't have to find a 5 to 6 inch mold, okay? You can mold whatever size you want. This was, you know, 7 1/4, okay? But I have the luxury of cutting this down. So I'm gonna make some tick marks all the way around at 6 inches. Okay, you can't just make one mark. We're working 3-dimensional, so you gotta go all the way around. And then at that point, I can follow my tick marks. And really what I'm doing is I'm holding my tool perfectly still and I'm spinning the object. That's the best way to trim off the top. See, and now I've got a 6-inch base. I'd clean up that edge, clean up the rest of the outside, and then get my name on the bottom and put it on the cart.